Hello, and welcome to Design Driven, a collaboration from Homepage News, Springboard Futures, and the Inspired Home Show. I'm Tom Mirabile, trend strategist, principal of Springboard, and expert resource to the IHA. The mission of Design Driven is to bring inspiration and intelligence on the evolving role of design in the home and housewares marketplace. We invite industry-leading experts on design and style to the table, and we talk to them about what's new and prepare for what's next. Particularly important in this episode because we'll be talking about generative artificial intelligence. Generative AI is being used increasingly in design applications. Simply put, it's a technology which can be used to generate both concepts and dimensional images in the process of designing physical products. This process starts with a prompt or a query that could be in the form of text or an image, even an existing design, somewhat in the same way that one might use a search engine like Google. But unlike search engines in common use, it does not simply return existing knowledge for the user to sort through. Instead, Gen AI uses various algorithms to translate responses to that query and generate new, unique representations of dimensional objects, illustrations, even original product concepts. The complexity of Gen AI reaches easily beyond our ability to even imagine its uses. In the foreseeable future, it will help write code, develop products, redesign business processes, and transform supply chains. So needless to say, there are as many concerns as there are questions swarming around Gen AI. Among these, its potential for misuse and abuse, as well as its potential to disrupt existing business models. As always, Design Driven turns to those at the vanguard of this technology's use to help us unpack at first, at least some of its fundamental usage and realities. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by two such experts. My first guest is Steve Cozzolino, founder and principal of Cozzolino Studio. Cozzolino Studio is an award-winning, distinguished industrial design firm with over 25 years of consulting experience. Steve has collaborated with Ava Zeisel. After serving as design director at Kareem Rashid Incorporated, Steve launched Cozzolino Studios, a full-service product design, strategy, and branding studio. I've had the pleasure of working with Steve myself. His success is probably best expressed by the roster of clients he has, including All-Clad, Cuisinart, Johnson & Johnson, L'Oreal, Mattel, Mr. Coffee, Nambe, Oster, PepsiCo, and of course, AB InBev, parent company of Anheuser-Busch and their best-known beer brands. Cozzolino Studio has received multiple Red Dot Design Awards, has been featured in the New York Times, and was honored by the City of New York with an Excellence in Design Award. The studio has repeatedly won good design awards, both in housewares design and elsewhere, and Steve has received numerous design patents as well. My second guest is Scott Henderson, an American designer, artist, writer, and curator from New York who has risen to the pinnacle of his profession as one of the world's leading industrial designers. Scott has spoken about design throughout the world. He's won over 50 international design awards, including a 2023 Red Dot Award. He has represented the United States as their design ambassador, has chaired the International Design Conference. Scott has also designed iconic best-selling products for companies including OXO, Microsoft, Krups, Intel, and Alessi. And he's also, over 50 of his products have been bestsellers at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. His work is included in the permanent collections of the Brooklyn Museum, the Cooper Hewitt, Smithsonian National Design Museum, and the Alessi Museum. Both Steve and Scott are presenters and expert commentators on America by Design Innovations, which is now heading into its 4th season. Participants this season include Coca-Cola, Timberland, Radio Flyer, Stratasys, Avangrid Iberdrola, and others. The show America by Design Innovations will air in season 4, late 2024 spring on CBS. So please take a look at it. But in the meantime, let's join our guest for an exploration of Gen AI. So Scott Henderson and Steve Cozzolino, welcome, and thank you both for joining me for this discussion. Generative AI is an evolving technology. It's playing an expanding role in home product design and development, marketing, and even sourcing and manufacture to an extent. So I wanted to start by creating some common points of reference for our viewers by defining today's topic a bit more so that as we move forward, the uses of generative AI, both real and potential, are a little bit easier to get our heads around. Steve, I want to start with you. Can you frame up some of the defining aspects of generative AI and how it differs from AI as viewers might currently understand it?
Sure. Generative AI, as it sounds, it generates or creates new original content, whether that's visuals and imagery, music, text, right? As students are developing their own term papers with ChatGPT. Uh, but it's creating new content based on input, based on prompts that a user, a human will give it. And it basically scrapes, what exists, the data and images that exist off the internet, and it mashes them together and creates some new original content. It's almost like a visual search engine, right? So
Okay.
that's generative AI. And then there's predictive AI, which is really scraping historical data off the internet to predict future outcomes, which is really interesting to me because right now, this time of year for me is baseball, and I read the baseball forecast. So this is a big business, right? And a lot of my friends are involved in it. It's forecasting future play. How do you forecast future player performance? So you take past performance, past historical data, advanced metrics and analytics, and then through, again, analysis, you predict future outcomes based on that past data. So that has a big implication, I think, on, say, sports betting and gambling, which is an exploding industry.
Well,
I think it's really interesting predictive because then, from a business standpoint, companies can use it, say, in portfolios like investments, right, and try to predict future outcomes financially. So there's some, really big implications there. And so that's a main difference between the two. And then there's obviously AI as a virtual assistant, right? You talk about, say, customer service and call centers, and AI is being used there as well. So it basically takes, again, existing data that's on the internet and answers questions based on, what it finds on the internet.
okay. So Scott, you've worked extensively with Gen AI. Would you walk us through maybe an example of Gen AI in use and how you integrated that into your design process? We're going to be showing as you speak some of the images of a particular project that you created, a yacht called Strider, which is absolutely unbelievable. Talk us through it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I've used it extensively because the whole thing hasn't even been in existence for 2 years yet.
Let's say
But
comparatively.
yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, I like a lot of designers, I got excited about it and I wanted to learn about it, and so I started using apps like Mid-Journey. And what I find really useful about it is, well, the way I would sum it up, it's kind of like having an intern, like somebody who is there that you can use to do certain things. It's a nice tool. And one thing that I do as a designer that I've always done for the last 30 years or more is mood boarding. And I always found that mood boarding is an essential part of the design process for me. And so what mood boarding is you scour Google Images or whatever for whatever topic you're working on, and you look for imagery that could influence it or is inspirational to it. And with generative AI like Midjourney or some of the other apps, now you can do that same thing, but you can do it on a custom basis, custom level. You can customize what you're looking for based on prompts that you place into the Midjourney. So now you're generating custom mood boards, and there's a whole bunch of other ways too that it is very useful in terms of, like a lot of us designers do a lot of renderings, and in these rendering programs, you have the option to create back plates, they call them, which is basically like a background. And it makes your object, your vehicle, whatever it is you're designing, you place it in a real environment. But you have to find that imagery, that environment on Google or somewhere,
Right.
and now you can generate it. You can generate it custom. You can make a kitchen exactly the way you want it, and you put it behind your blender that you just designed for your client. And so those sound like small examples,
Oh,
but
no,
actually they're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use Midjourney and other AI programs like that, for all these sort of process enhancing methodologies.
And those are cost savings too, really. I mean, it's if you're gonna have to buy it from Shutterstock or someplace else, a million other applications, but that's also another thing that represents.
Yeah. exactly. And also you can feed these programs prompts, show me this environment in a dramatic early morning light, and it will give you like a really bold, amazing sun coming over the horizon kind of a thing that you would never be able to find by searching around on an image platform, and you get it precisely right because you can constantly tell the program to adjust what they're showing you, and then you can do it 30, 40 times in a row, but somewhere in there you're going to get the image you need. Yeah.
So with Strider, talk a little bit about that project specifically. What was, how much influence came from you? How much influence came from the program? Why was it a great tool to use in this case?
Well, it's a really good tool because I would put in prompts about vehicle design, super yachts, marine design, and it doesn't necessarily
Helipad.
it
I'd
doesn't
love to say the
necessarily
helipad.
it definitely doesn't give you some usable output, but you might see the way that a door is handled on it, or a stairwell is handled, or some detail that you might not have thought of yourself that can influence you. And it's just very useful. And then with some of that input, it just aids in my sketching, my ability to create my own unique take on the design. And then I do the traditional methods that I've always done, but I have been influenced by AI because I've used it early in the upfront stages of the project.
And do you bring that in at any particular time in the process? I mean, is it more something that you bring in on the beginning, or do you work with it once you can show it a rendering that you've already got, or is it just sort of throughout, in and out?
You can do it throughout. I mean, it's really, for me anyway, it's useful right in the beginning because you can sort of, as part of your priming of yourself to get into the headspace of the category that you're working on, because all designers like Steve and I, we work on varieties of different things. One day we might be working on a coffee maker. The next day we might be working on a wristwatch. The next day we might be working on a car. And so, you have to switch gears. And for me, that usually involves some form of immersion into mood boarding and that kind of thing. And the AI is just really great for that. And
Steve, from a strictly business perspective, what does Gen AI bring to your operational capabilities that maybe previous technologies didn't deliver on it?
So that's what, from operation, I go back to process. I mean, Scott's right. It enhances process, right? It makes things more efficient, more cost effective. Number one, right? AI doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't get emotional, right? So I compare it to 3D printing, right? Early days of 3D printing. Originally, back in the day, at one point when I was a student, way back when, decades and decades ago, you would, go to a model maker or make your own model with, 4 or 5 different orthographic views, put it up on a block, start cutting away at a foam block and, by hand and shaping that foam. Now, you just send a file at night after work, go to sleep. Next morning, you have one or multiple prototypes printed out, right? So it's kind of like that. You can, give the AI some prompts, and then it could spit out, thousands of ideas, while you're asleep. But it's interesting to me. I mean, we use it specifically. We don't have any AI interns, Scott, but we definitely like Scott in the sense of like mood boarding, right? We've done that already in inspiration aspects. So I think from a business standpoint, we can generate inspiration and mood boards up front quicker. So that's a time saver, right? So I think that whole time saving, just like 3D printing, save time on prototyping and model making. I think AI will make the whole process much more efficient and streamlined, even more so. And even on the back end, when you're trying to specify certain materials that are, say, more, what's the most optimum material for sustainability plus cost, you have different parameters and inputs of different prompts, which they call that prompt engineering. So I think prompt engineering is a skill they'll have to learn. And so you prompt in the back end for execution, what's the best way to make this this object, so we're 3D designers or product designers. So what to make this object, what's the most affordable method from a manufacturing standpoint? What's the most affordable material that's also most sustainable? Right. So whether it's different, and you get the nuances and specifics of different types, certain types of plastics versus certain types of metals, et cetera. So I think that type of information can really help expedite and streamline, our process within
Yeah,
throughout the.
I think prompt engineering was listed as one of Fortune's largest job opportunities for the coming 2 years, and I
Yeah,
thought that was
I'm
really
sure it'll become a college major if it's not already.
right. It was compared to oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? When you have search engine optimization,
Right.
all of
SEO.
those. So it really is in a way it's its own thing. So Scott, pros from the business perspective for you?
Pros from the business perspective. Well, I don't know. I just find it is a great new tool. And designers often think about just the visual tools to enhance the process, like Midjourney and so on. But ChatGPT is just completely text-based.
Right.
But in the design process, I'll use that too. Like, for example, in ChatGPT, you can put in a simple question like, what are some of the difficulties a user may encounter while sweeping the floor? And it will give you all kinds of reasons why the dirt's going to wind up in a corner, why it's going to get airborne and you're going to breathe it. Well, it'll list out 20 reasons why of the difficulties you might encounter by sweeping the floor. And some of them are super obvious, but some of them you might be like, oh yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah.
And if it only takes 10 seconds to do that, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really great it's a great use of the application. We've been using ChatGPT in survey development for the exact same reason when we're trying to say, okay, so what makes cooking difficult? What are some of the most problematic things about, frying an egg, or something like that. So you can get to every little thing. And, you may not be thinking about the head of the spatula when you do that, the way it fits the pan, but it's like,
Yeah.
or the breadth of
Right.
it. But those are
I
things.
mean, design firms set up cameras and to watch people fry an egg in a kitchen, because they think that they will uncover some nuance that they might not have, been able to think of while sitting behind a computer at their desk. And ChatGPT is going to do that. It's gonna tell you something you didn't think of. And so,
And
that's
ChatGPT, correct me if I'm wrong, that's also scraping from it gives preference to volumes. Is that right? So it's gonna, if the most common thing that people say is that the spatula burns in the pan, then that's gonna float to the top in the response that you get. And I think that's what really helps us, is it almost is a survey in and of itself.
But you can challenge it. Like, so, after it tells you that dust is going to wind up in the corner, you just type in the word more and it'll give you 5 more. And then you type in the word more and it'll give you 5 more. And if you do that 30 times, I'm telling you that you will see
You will
something
find
in there that will inspire you,
That's interesting. ChatGPT, one thing I was doing recently, just literally last week with a client/friend, was generating company names, potentially company names, right? So you put the parameters in what the business is about and ChatGPT, and then it lists, bang out, boom, 30 name options, right? And then it's funny, it learned itself, like in machine learning, we kept asking it different prompts, but along the same theme, and it started becoming a bit more redundant. And after a while, after 10 minutes, we have 200 plus names, and I think about 2 or 3 were pretty good. Overall, a lot of them weren't usable, but it just was interesting to me to see how iterative it is, and how all of a sudden, you're getting a lot of redundancy once you get to the third or fourth or fifth ask.
So let me ask you both, from a creative perspective, general benefits and risks of generative AI.
Well, I think there's a lot of benefits, right? I think at the end of the day, the inspiration aspect of it, I think both the front end I mentioned of really getting, and Scott even mentioned it with generating a lot of I think mood boards that could be really inspiring, especially now. We were working with it in the summer, And some of the imagery, it struggled with humans and hands. We give you 6 fingers or no thumb, or merging a hand with an object. Um, and now, and this is just recently, since December, basically October, November, December. Now you look at DALL-E 3 and ChatGPT Plus, and all the details are looking much better. Hands, humans are much better. So I think there's a huge benefit, and I think at the end of the day, it's as good as the user. So as good as you prompt, the input you put in will really dictate how the output and how good that is. But I think there's a ton of opportunity to really leverage the tool. And as Scott called it a tool, I agree. It's definitely another tool in the designer's toolkit. And I do think that the value is there, to really advance our profession. I think there's a ton of influence there, that Scott alluded to when he was talking about the yacht that he had designed. So, but I still think you'll always need the human interaction too, because it can get you so far, but it won't make that real human emotional connection. And that's where the magic happens, where a designer, product designer, puts their hands on something to refine the overall design. So I think that's where it'll need, that's where a product designer would come into play to really still maintain the significance of their role, how important our role is, in the process. So that, I mean, but the benefits are going to be numerous, in that end. I guess, I don't know, Scott, you want to elaborate on that? I'll get into risk after, but the benefit wise, I mean, I think there's just a lot of influence that AI can have within optimizing our process.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, well, I think like some of the risks that it poses are similar to what I would equate Instagram has done for design, in that so much visual content is now right at our fingertips, and we are overloaded with Instagram design, and it all looks really good at a glance, and there's a certain acceptance, or now the bar has been raised where there's a certain expectation that design is going to be at this level. And AI is going to make that easier and easier and easier to achieve. So the people that we design for, our clients or so on, they're going to expect that level. And there's a risk, I think, of generating, like, all product design is going to start to have a similarity to it. It's not going to have, that uniqueness, that breakthrough, that aha. So that I believe will be the risk, much similar to the way Instagram has been doing that to design for a long time.
Yeah, I agree on that risk. I agree that and I thought about that too, that the sea of sameness, right? That's out there. We saw that in the housewares industry, specifically with vendors, right, in China, when they started making things. Chinese vendors are fantastic at replicating, and making something that already exists, and not necessarily something new in innovation. They're not all about innovation, and that's our role, right? But the same thing with AI, right? Things, as I mentioned with the names, that there's all of a sudden a redundancy and a repetition. You can see that there could be definitely similarities being developed if we're looking at it from a product development standpoint.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think what it is everybody craves authenticity, and the designer's individual take, is authentic because it's unique. It's coming from an original point of view.
Right.
And so, that's the thing to keep in mind, is that to make sure that you don't sacrifice that and take the easy way out, by leveraging the tool of AI too much, but to allow it to just influence you for the power that it does have.
Right. Got it. So, Steve, across industries, from entertainment to fashion, certainly graphic design and marketing, there's been a fairly broad concern that adoption, or really over-adoption, of Gen AI could have job value and job loss or replacement, repercussions. What are your thoughts on that regarding product design and development in the home and housewares industries in particular?
Well, we touched upon that as far as if it's streamlining the process. and it's generating a lot of ideas, whether while we sleep or not. It's just there's a lot of content being created, good or bad. I'm more about a quality than quantity, but as Scott mentioned, some of the imagery that AI is generating is really excellent, right? Just outstanding. Now, I think the job loss or replacement could be on that level, the execution. Now, there's a small part of design that's implementation, right? So I think the magic that happens that Scott alluded to, as far as like us creating something authentic and meaningful and putting our handprint on that, and that's why a client would come to say, Scott or myself, that can't be replaced. Those jobs, that job's not replaced. That is it a job or a talent, that skill, right? Can't be replaced by, say, a machine learning. But the back end, that implementation or execution, right? And that's where the illustration comes into play, because AI can generate incredible photorealistic images and renders.
Right.
So 3D visualization, which has been a big business for some companies, that may be, visual designers, visualization designers, maybe their jobs could be at risk, right? Based on how well AI can generate beautiful imagery, whether it's photo or illustration.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm wondering is as we look at, if we look at graphic artists, okay, because a lot of their work is very one-dimensional, there's bigger risk there, and we've already seen job loss, because so much of what's being done is very one-dimensional. Now, your skill sets and the way you think and the way you design products and materiality and all of, and having to consider manufacture, all of that adds a dimension to product design and development that's very different and hard to replicate. So I'm tending to agree with what you're saying, that at least in the foreseeable future, we're not looking at something aside from
you touch on something important there, right? Like, it's not, you talk about the substance, Scott mentioned it, that's a substance that we provide, not the surface value. AI can knock it out of the park when it comes to surface, right? And I hate the word style, right? I'm not a stylist, man. I don't do hair and makeup, right? In style,
right.
fashion, it's always like a moving target, right? And we focus on timeless, enduring design, products that look good and work well, right? And this whole idea of style and fashion, obviously, it's a moving target. It's based on trends that are always moving, but AI can provide style upon style upon style, and provide, those type of illustrations at the end of the day, if you want, or content, 2D content that has its own value. And again, not the value we provide. That's not industrial design.
Scott, your thoughts on this? Do you anticipate Gen AI lowering headcount on any, or skill sets needed for any of your upcoming projects?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you think back to the advent of 3D computer generated models, CAD, you think back to the 1950s, where there's a huge room of designers sitting there at drafting tables with their drafting arms, that went away, and a lot of everything from design to engineering is going to be so enhanced by AI that certainly jobs will change or go away or evolve. But that's the way it is. It's the way it is with everything. And, it's certainly the advent of 3D CAD technology didn't ruin the design profession. And this won't ruin it either. It's just going to change it.
Yeah. It's like the cream rises to the top, right? It's like
Right.
better designers, people who can
It's still
really
garbage in, garbage out.
leverage.
I mean, it's still a matter of what's going on in your head. So are your clients currently inquiring whether or not Gen AI is part of your design process?
Not
For me, some. If you want to go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
well, not for me. So far, if I do use AI and I mention it in a presentation, like, oh, by the way, this was AI, everybody thinks it's interesting and novel, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. Like some of these product managers, they have MBAs, they know their markets inside and out, and they can see at a glance what's going to fit within their market, what's going to sell, what's going to work against the competition, and how it was done doesn't register at all. They're looking for what has been done, what has been presented. So I would say, like, so far, no, I have not had anybody request it or inquire about it or wonder about it at all.
So it'll be interesting to see in a year if that's changed at all, because it's everybody knows the word, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're here is everybody knows the terms, but they don't know what any of them mean. So it's, but as we move forward, like Coca-Cola, and I'll put it up on screen for viewers, but Coca-Cola had a campaign, that we're creating real magic with, with AI, and that you could create cards and send them to people, on this special site that they, I think it's called realmagic.com, but like I said, I'll put it on screen for everybody. It's still active as of now, even though it was this past Christmas. But they, I mean, that idea, all of those things, when you're Coca-Cola and you put that out there, all of a sudden everybody knows what AI is, and they start researching it and they start finding out more. So it'll just be interesting. It's not even that people understand it. I guess I'm more interested, it's like when in the way back, when I was working with design teams, and you'd have clients saying to you, are you uh they want to know what programs you were using, even though I had no idea how they were working. They wanted to know, what you were using so that they could judge whether or not you were of the moment by whether or not you were using that. And I always thought that was interesting, whether, at what point does AI become an expectation in the design process?
Mhm.
Scott, let me ask you something else. Generative AI, it promises to help creative workers explore variations on designs and product concepts, and then use those as a starting point, as you said, for further refinement. At this point, the Gen AI programs in use are sort of iterative in nature. That is to say, they generate new concepts, as you said, for consideration based on your request, and they're using millions of reference materials that they are trained on or scrubbed from other resources. Because of that, there's been sort of a humming concern across industries about both sides of the design industry, and that this may be the death knell of true originality and creativity. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely a concern, because sometimes I find, let's just give you an example. Like, say I were working on a bike helmet or something like that, and I just to explore creativity, I would put in a prompt that said, "Show me a bike helmet designed by Coco Chanel," you know, and then it will spit out helmet concepts that look like they were designed by Coco Chanel. And because you gave it such a definitive point of view there, the concepts are strong,
Right.
as opposed to saying, show me a bike helmet that is wind resistant, or, yeah. You gave it something so specific that the concepts come out stronger. And so are you violating, are you now violating Coco Chanel's IP? And probably the answer is yes. And so there's definitely concerns there. So I think, like, the important thing is, the way I use it is for inspiration, much like I would put a mood board together. And as far as I'm concerned, the way a designer has always worked, or functions, is that we observe things, and we walk the earth, and we're picking up information constantly and storing it in our minds. And then it's our job, we have chosen it to be our job, to restitch those pieces of data back together again in the form of what we call a design. And but the elements of those pieces came from somewhere, and AI is just making that easier. You can do it from your computer now, as opposed to walking up and down the city all day. You know what I mean? And it's a tool. It's a good tool. It's a very powerful tool, and that's the way it should be looked at, I think.
Steve, do you agree? Any other thoughts on how
Wow.
Gen AI is going to affect the creative process?
Well, I do think, I mean, I really agree with Scott. I mean, he hit the nail on the head as far as, what we bring to the table, we are observers, right? A designer is going to observe how humans behave. We understand, we observe, and we understand human behavior. And then by that, we would like to improve how people live, through these everyday objects. And we understand human needs, unmet needs, and pain points of products, right? And it's creative problem solving around these parameters that AI will not, doesn't understand human behavior per se right now, but or understand needs that aren't being met. And how do we make improvements? I mean, at the end of the day, we're making objects better, we're improving objects or products and things. And AI is not thinking or looking to improve something necessarily, right? So on that side of the creative problem solving and design process, I think that's where the value again in design. And some clients understand that. You move off the house for show, what clients understand, companies understand the value of design and what we bring to the table, and others don't. Others will say, hey, here, they'll ask a designer to give them a couple images, a handful of designs or images, and then they send those to China, right? To the vendor and the factory interprets and translates in 3D, and then gets them made and manufactured. That's kind of the same thing I see here, is like that, not valuing design and just saying, let's get it done and let's get it made at the cheapest cost possible to market the fastest. That mentality, could be consistent with AI. It's like, okay, let's get some images from AI, and then those will be what we bring to market. Without really understanding the value that us as designers can bring to the table, bringing them, solutions that really, improves people's lives. So I don't think, generative AI can do that for sure. So I'm not concerned about
It lacks
that.
context unless you give it specific context.
Right.
So recently there have been some impressive uses of Gen AI in ready-to-wear. Some manufacturers using it not just for product design, but to recommend production efficiencies, propose materials for use depending on what the product's being used for. Can you talk about that a bit, Steve?
I do think on the execution, the materials you mentioned, right? Proposing materials, optimizing what, and I alluded to earlier, like optimizing certain materials for whatever the parameters may be, whatever the input you give it, whether it's sustainability or price point, technical requirements. Is it robust enough? Is it weather resistant, flame retardant? Whatever those technical requirements are, you put those, add those inputs to what you're prompting AI. So then ideally it will give you the, most the ideal and appropriate material. And that can also go hand in hand with color and, finishes and textures. So I think from the executional standpoint, how to optimize materials and process and manufacturing, that definitely can come into play.
So just as example, looking back at your work, for example, let's say you're doing a piece, an alternative metal bowl. It's going to take into account the material to determine what the radius has to be on the rim or how thick the walls need to be to give it structural integrity. So it's kind of doing that thinking for you, and it's going to stop you from making certain problems in design. Like, will it be able to warn you if you're getting too thin for the rigidity of a certain material, or is that where we're going?
Yes, most likely it will learn that. It will know that, before manufacturing, it's going to learn what those technical constraints are. It's right now it still makes mistakes, right? And will,
Right.
but it's going to understand and learn what the most efficient material and the most efficient process will be to make that object.
So obviously, the complexity of generative AI makes adopting it as a part of an organization's process could be really fraught. Scott, since you're navigating these waters, I wanted to pose a question to you. If an organization determines that Gen AI is a good fit for them as a new tool to integrate, what advice would you give on like best practices that design, development, marketing, other creative groups should keep in mind as they integrate AI into their process? Because it's not going to be an overnight change thing, right? So what should be on their mind?
I would just say, that they shouldn't allow the AI programs to create the uh, the exact thing that they plan on selling, because and use it more the way I use it, which is as a inspirational tool. Yeah, it's just I would think that even though one thing about it, which is really interesting, is that it'll never duplicate the same image twice, just because of the way it works. So you are generating a unique snowflake when you use it every time. But it's probably to your peril from some of these other reasons that we talked about earlier, the sameness, the lack of originality, the fooling of yourself in thinking that you've generated something that is exceptional when it's actually mediocre in real practice. You have to still rely on testing and prototyping and the tools that have been the hallmark of the design profession. They still are going to be paramount to success of a product.
Steve, any thoughts?
Well, I think the question is, can AI create innovation, right? It's like, is AI, will it learn what is innovative, right? And I think that the answer is yet to be seen. Who knows? But I would say, unlikely, right? Because we know what it's good at, and as I mentioned, it's better at execution, implementation. I think illustrate replicating, right? Like there's that whole replica. You go to Guangzhou and you see in Canton Market Fair, there's all the replicas of different products. And I mean, AI is going to be a good replicant, right, of that of things. And it has been that's the problem with Illustrator that illustrators have with AI, right? It's generating these images. If you say, hey, the prompt is give me a Van Gogh painting of an athlete or a Picasso Cubist period image of a robot, it like gives you exactly that. And then illustrators, in general, illustrators, what they bring to the table is a specific hand and an eye. There's certain specific aesthetic sensibility to the table. That's what their value is. And if all of a sudden that can be replicated easily, instantaneously by AI, and that's the problem that these illustrators are having. So, in that part of the creative process, and that can go into ad campaigns, right? I've seen examples of AI is improving dramatically already on package design, right? So if you give it the parameters of, say, give me a blue, red, and yellow or gold Aztec theme on a box of, for crackers or a bag of potato chips, then you're going to get a lot of nice options that are very close to that. And now that they're combining DALL-E 3 with ChatGPT Plus, originally you couldn't even get the text right, like the logo and everything looking good. But now they're producing this content that even the logo and the label looks nice. Like it's fooling you. If you squint your eyes, it looks like maybe a Maybelline or L'Oreal. Like it's going to look like that brand. They did an example of that with Tiffany, and it was creating these Tiffany boxes that look like the real thing. So it's quickly learning. But again, I think it's much more on the replica, on the replicating things as opposed to anything new, truly innovative. Not new isn't the right word, but I'd say truly innovative.
So
I would add to that a little, though. I would say that it already is generating innovation, and without question, it will generate innovation. Because the thing about it is, like, say you ask it to design an aircraft for you, and what you do is you put in a prompt like, design me an air taxi with 4 rotors and autonomous vehicle. You plug in a lot of information that you want this thing to generate, and it spits out something that is not right, and then you modify and you regenerate it, and 30 times in, it is trying to work out how to blend the wing format into the fuselage better. It is trying to work all these things out, and it does. It works it out. And those are innovations. Its attempts to fix itself are innovative. And if we're only, into this a year, 2 years in now, I'm scared to think about it in 10 years. And it's already generating innovation.
Right. And let me when you talk about something like you just did about aircraft, that's talking about using in that instance, you're talking about an app or a program that's been trained on specific information like aeronautics, right? I mean, it's not that I can go in and do that with anything AI right now, because it may not know the materials, or it may not know, how air moves, or it may not know,
It's all about your prompts. So it's just, you can use Midjourney to design a helicopter. It's just about your prompts and how much how much valuable information is within that prompt that you're looking for, and that'll make it go find something on the internet that has value and incorporate it into your output.
Well,
That's
actually,
what prompt
that
engineers
raises,
are
and,
valuable.
and this isn't a challenge. I completely agree with what you're saying, but that does raise one question, or rather an issue, about how unlike somebody going out and getting inspiration or doing their research on something in Google, with generative AI, what you're pulling up, you don't necessarily know the source. So you're generating images and concepts, but you don't know whether it's pulling from you have to do your own homework in a way. You don't know whether it's pulling from a resource that, unless you've done yourself a custom, you've scrubbed your information from
I
somewhere.
question whether or not it even matters,
Well,
whether or not
when
it knows the source or not.
well, if we're
Because
talking
like
about
I said
freedom,
before, like when, like as designers, we're collecting information and then it's our job to wield it later. And this is just a tool that's doing the exact same thing that human beings do, you know?
right? But I mean, it matters if it's pulling the information from someplace that doesn't have the information right, whereas you know the information for what
At the end of the day, you have to
it requires that part.
three-dimensionalize something and test it. So
Right.
whether or not it's right or not in the form of some imagery that it makes for you is irrelevant, but it could inspire the end result. At the end of the day, you have to make it physically real. And
Right.
and AI will be able to do that in 10 years. Absolutely, 100%. You'll be able to put in a prompt and something's going to show up in your printer. It's going to three-dimensionalize these things 100%. I'm sure it's doing it already somewhere.
I'm sure it is.
Right. I think
Well, as
less
we
than
wrap
10
the
years.
session, is
That's for
there
sure.
anything either of you want to add regarding realities, risks, rewards, any other aspect of generative AI?
I think the risks and the point of like the prompt, AI is going to be as good as the person adding the prompts. That's why prompt engineering is going to be so critical moving forward. Um, as the risk that we become more reliant on it, I just think we use it as that tool and leverage it and optimize everything we talked about today, right? Between the process, the output, the imagery, we can just harness it. And Scott's right about machine learning. I mean, it's going to be improving and improving the mistakes it makes so that as it learns quickly, more so than a human can, um, we can leverage it to become a really, truly powerful tool. So I think it really still, to me, I just look at it as a really benefit, a tool that is going to really improve our process and the output of our work.
Scott, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I equate it to there's a thing out there called computational CAD, which is the thing that generates all these beautiful lattice-like forms, and basically you look at those and you see them emulating nature, and it's just because the amount of input that is going in is too complex for one conscious mind to be able to wield. And AI is the same. It's taking a lot more information than one person's mind can wield and being able to do it for you. And it can only be good. I mean, people were blown away when the calculator first came out. I mean, you have to embrace these technologies. Design and technology have always been extremely integrated because design's main focus and purpose is to create something that you can make more than one of, so you have to, be able to communicate that to like a manufacturing partner or whatever. So design and technology have always been symbiotic. And AI is the latest, probably the most powerful example of that. But you either, embrace that because it's here and it's not going to go away, or, you'll probably have trouble if you don't embrace it.
I agree. Well, I've hoped that we've been able to dispel some of the mysteries and the myths that surround generative AI. Scott, Steve, it's been informative, it's been inspiring. Thank you so much for clarifying a really complex but certainly crucial issue, and for also providing us with some actionable information. For those viewers who wish to contact either of my guests, you can reach Scott Henderson via his website at scotthendersoninc.com and Steve Cozzolino via his site at cozzolinostudio.com. I'm Tom Mirabile, and on behalf of Homepage News, Springboard Futures, and the Inspired Home Show, thanks for spending time with us and Design Driven. And thank you both again.